Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, 3 Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading 3 Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to have as my guest Gayle Nobel. Gayle is an author, transformative life coach, parent mentor, blogger, and inspirational speaker. She has a lifelong connection to autism through her brother and her son. Gayle is the author of 3 inspirational books on living with autism. Space of Love is her 3rd book and her deepest work yet. Gayle resides in Phoenix, Arizona with her husband and her son, Kyle. So welcome, Gayle. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
It's great to have you here. So, as I was just telling you, I love your book. I listened to it for the 2nd time, and it's so rich on so many levels. There's some beautiful poems in there, and as much as it addresses the world of autism, it's also it's for anybody. I mean, it's not just for people that are interested in learning more about autism. But before we, give us a little bit of background on how autism shows up in your world. What's your connection to it?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's a lifelong connection because my brother, who's only about 16 months younger than I am, has severe autism, even though I didn't really know what it was growing up for a long time. And he lived in an institution for most of my life. And then my son comes along and he's almost exactly the same.
Wow.
So they both are very similar in how their autism presents, with a lot of I'll call them add-on issues to the autism. So cognitive issues and sensory issues and just a whole package.
Yeah, because the spectrum is so broad. You can say autism and it just shows up in so many different ways. So how does it manifest for Kyle? And well, first of all, how old is he?
Yeah, so Kyle's 35 now.
Oh, okay. So
and for him, he has this beautiful, sweet, gentle personality. So I'll say that first. Autism aside or whatever, who he is. He's just very, very gentle and sweet, and easy in a lot of ways. He tends to be more passive, but the way that it shows up for him is he's not verbal, so communication is really challenging. I mean, we read him and he reads us, and he's got some pretty limited communication. So there are a lot of unknowns in life with him. And he just needs a lot of help and support with everything, with his personal care, his showering and his shaving and fixing his meals. So it's pretty intensive for what his needs are.
Yeah, I can relate. My mother we had a home. I grew up in a home for people that had mental illnesses and what we call back then, handicaps. I don't know, it's probably politically incorrect to say that now.
It changes.
But yeah, it is a full-time job. It really is. So tell me, I know that you wrote books. This is your 3rd book. And you had written books prior to that for people that were sort of had an autistic child or partner or somebody in their life. So what would you say is the biggest difference between the Space of Love and the books that you wrote before you came across this understanding of the principles?
Yeah, they're really quite different. And on the outside, somebody might think that they're the same because the format is a little bit similar. They're all very short and very personal stories. But Space of Love, each story and poem, as you know from listening to it, really has a much deeper message within it. My attempt at really trying to explain the human experience and how we have that human experience and what the factors are. So my first 2 books, I wasn't really aware. I didn't know about this understanding. I didn't know or understand where our experience comes from. So actually some of the things I said in my first 2 books, I would probably say the opposite to now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggest difference. Space of Love is very much a book about life. In a way, my first two books were as well, but Space of Love definitely is a book about the human experience and life in general.
Yeah, I haven't read the first two books, but I get the sense that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming here, but it might have been more of a how to cope type of approach, whereas I really got from the Space of Love, it was how to embrace what is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Yeah. So describe it. What was life like before you came across the principles? How were you in those? And I'm using the word quotation marks here, coping.
Yeah. Well, I was coping pretty well, I think. So I don't really have a story that says, oh, I was a basket case then, but now I'm really great. So really it wasn't like that. I felt like I was coping and thriving rather than surviving. I always considered myself thriving, even though we went through some really challenging times. I had a very big toolbox of things that I did. And that was part of my, what I would share and what I would write about, in terms of, yoga and meditation and positive thinking and reframing and, all those things. And, but once I ran into this experience or this understanding of the human experience and really got a glimpse into how it's created, how it's all based on thought, and the piece of and how I was always connected to this wisdom, because before I think I would really struggle and strain. There was a lot of figuring things out, and I would say for now, understanding that I don't really need to do all that, because I will figure it out in real time. That's one of the differences. I do a lot more of kind of showing up to life and then figuring it out as I go, which is what all of us really do anyway. We just think we do it differently. So yeah, I would say that's a bigger difference. And for me, the idea that thought can flow through and I will have a different experience and I will feel different. I will feel better. I will feel worse. But knowing that, I feel like I don't have to get in there and struggle so much with where I'm at from time to time.
Yeah, fix it, correct it, change course, and all of that. Just the allowing. So it feels so much more relaxed. I love some of the titles of the book. I mean, you talk about, let me see here. Well, the one in particular I'm thinking about is you wrote because what I love about the book is there are chapters and then there are poems that you wrote. And one of my favorite poems is the Lemonade poem.
Yeah.
And you have a line in that where you talk about lemony, is it lemony thinking or lemony thoughts?
Lemony thoughts.
I know. Yeah. Just tell me a bit more about lemony thoughts.
Yeah. The lemony thoughts are kind of like the poor me, in relation to, say, having a child with autism. This is awful, poor me, poor child, poor everybody. And you just know that when you're having those kind of thoughts, it looks like that child is causing your experience. And it's sour and it doesn't taste very good sometimes. But when you start to see that, you don't have to fix them, you don't have to get rid of the lemons, but that it's not that child. It's that thing that comes right in between that child and your experience, and that's the power of thought.
I remember having a conversation with Bill Pettit about this, especially having grown up, as I say, in the environment I grew up in, and I think a lot of us, and myself back then, thought that, well, when you look at somebody that's really having challenges, where is the innate well-being there? And I love, what he told me basically was, it regardless of what it looks like on the outside, they still have innate well-being. So can you talk a bit about that? Is that what you see in Kyle now?
I do. And that's probably another change for me in, oh yeah, there he is, there's a picture. um, it actually was one of my first big insights when I came across this understanding and talking with somebody. Kyle was really struggling with some cycles that he goes through. He hasn't had one in a couple of years, but he would go through these really, what I would call debilitating cycles, where he would be very agitated and upset for actually a couple of weeks. And I sure couldn't see it. I couldn't imagine that there was any sort of well-being there. But then I started to notice some of the things that he does when he would be in these cycles. For instance, he would be hitting his head a lot, so we would put a rafting helmet on his head. And he would just wear it the entire time this was going on, just to protect his forehead. And if you would go to try to take it off, now granted, he's not verbal and he's also in a very upset state, he would just take your hand, like, don't take that off of me. So to me, that and some of the other things he would do, like need to go lay down or whatever, show me, to me, that's the sign of his well-being, that there's something that even in this really difficult time for him, something is getting through, and he kind of, in a wild way, knows how to take care of himself a little bit. So there's that something in there. And then I'll even share another time where he was in a car accident almost a couple of years ago now, and we were in the intensive care the first night they brought him in, and even though he had broken all these bones, there were many moments where there was so much peace in there, in that room, where nurses actually commented on it. Like it was an energy. So where does that come from? I think it comes from that well-being. Yes.
I love that. That's so true. I know that was, you have that in the book, that, that was that, talk more about that experience, because here he is, you say multiple broken bones and trapped in a car by the time you got to him.
Yeah, he was, they had to pull him out of the car. He wasn't like pinned in there, but his door didn't open, so they had to pull him out.
And the fact that just so happens to people passing by were parents of autistic children themselves, and were able to be with him until you got there and talk to him, and that was
they stopped for some
miracle.
Reason, people driving by.
That's pretty incredible. So in what way, I know that you say that talk more about thought and wisdom in the world of autism, because I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this and saying, but how does that help?
I'll start actually with wisdom. It's just my favorite thing to see and to know about. It almost feels like a superpower, if I could say that, because it's really this force that we're all plugged into. It's within us, but it's also from without. It's something that we have access to. So there are so many times when you have a child with autism, well, even any child, but say a child with autism, when you feel so lost on what to do, there are so many decisions to be made all the time. And now, especially with the internet, which wasn't around when Kyle was little, there's even more decisions to be made. And it can feel like such a struggle and such an overwhelm and so big, and your head just gets so full with everything, with all of this and all of that, and you don't know what to do. And knowing that you are plugged in to this wisdom it's such a comfort because it says that you will know what to do. You will know what step to take. You have access to figuring that out, even if you don't know now. And I used to think if I didn't know, it was just the worst thing in the world. But now I kind of see that differently. Like the not knowing leaves space for me to hear something new. And so as far as living with autism, like if you know that you kind of carry that around in your back pocket, you just find yourself fretting a little less. It doesn't mean you never do or you never feel stressed, but for me, I think I worry less about deciding on things, and I worry less about figuring things out in the future. So that's the half of it. I don't know if you want me to keep going with the thought piece of it.
Well, we'll move on to that, but I so agree with you. I just love this feeling that knowing we're connecting to wisdom, guiding us, that you can't get it wrong. And as you say, you can relax. You don't have to be up in your head figuring things out. You actually get to be relaxed and in the moment and enjoy what Kyle does bring to you in that moment. I mean, I think we take ourselves away from relationships when we're trying to figure them out or worry about them, and we're really not in the moment with somebody. So that's really beautiful. I mean, it goes for any relationship, but especially, as you say, with dealing with autism, because you can start getting into the, what about the future? What are my plans? And, there could be a lot of things that could pull you away from that. So talk about the thought part more, the thinking.
Yeah, the thinking. The best way to explain it, and as a lot of your listeners know, but anybody that's not one of your listeners, it's really the thinking and the thought process that creates our experience. That is it. So energy of thought moves through us. Sometimes some of it gets a little stuck in there, and where we have some repetitive thinking going on, and that is what's creating our misery. It's that. And when you think that's mind-blowing. So it's not the fact that Kyle's not verbal and can't tell me what he wants to have for dinner. It's what I think about that. And you don't always remember it when you're in situations and you're upset or whatever, but it's something that once you understand it, and you really, really understand it and see it, everything just seems to pass through a little bit quicker. You're a little less likely to hold on to something for a very long time. And you just know that your experience is being created from inside you, inside out, not outside in.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in my mind, that's good news.
Yes.
Because then the world doesn't need to change for you to feel different or better. Then Kyle doesn't need to change. Then I don't need to fix autism for me to feel good. I can feel good anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And it really is. It's the thinking that it should be different than it is. The thinking that why, like you said, the thoughts, the lemony thoughts that could have been, why me, why him, why isn't it, this way or that way. It's that thinking that you can just create so much suffering, innocently, as we love to say, innocent suffering, because you just don't realize that it's the comparison, it's the expectation it be something else that can cause that suffering rather than just what is. Because I'm sure that, regardless of being verbal or not, love is just, it's it's there and you feel it. It has nothing to do with words anyway, and ways in which it's communicated. It's just there, so nothing can touch that.
Yeah, exactly.
So what would you, for people that do read your book, I know you say, what would be your biggest understanding that you'd like somebody to walk away with? Say somebody picked up your book who has a child with autism. What would be your biggest takeaway, or would you rather they have the biggest takeaway?
Yeah. Ooh, is it thought or is it wisdom?
Or maybe something else.
Yeah. I, yeah, well, it's hard to pick one thing, but I guess it would be, I love remembering that we each have that well-being within us, no matter what the outside package looks like. And I hope that that's clear enough in my book, because sometimes people will say, "Oh, I got this from your book," and I'm like, "Oh, you did?" But so so that piece that says that you're okay, no matter what happens in the outside world,
Yeah.
and your child is okay.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think for parents to understand that no matter what, they're okay too. I know for myself as a parent that when we worry about our children, I often think we're worried about ourselves. We're worried about how we would cope if something happened to them. But I think that knowing that they're okay and we're okay, and we have that within us too, that we can cope with whatever happens. So that's, I think, a very important piece to remember too.
Yeah.
So talk about, I know you do so much, but do you have any events coming up or any way that people can contact you and work with you, especially people that feel that they're overwhelmed with their life if they are dealing with a child with autism, or not dealing with, that's a horrible
Yeah,
word.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So on my website, GayleNobel.com, people can contact me about coaching. So I do coach, and I love working with parents. Those are some of my favorite people to coach. I also have a blog on that website that I blog fairly regularly. So there's more things to read. If you've read Space of Love and you're saying, I want more, well, that's where you should go. Of course, my books are all on Amazon and Apple and pretty much everywhere that you can get, get books and get audios.
Yeah. Now, do you ever bring parents together, groups, like support systems for each other, or is it all individual?
Well, so far it's been all individual. I've toyed with the idea of doing actually a group based on Space of Love, and I'm still kind of playing around with that. So I haven't done it yet, but it might be coming at some point.
Yeah. I know I'm actually moving away from this a little bit, but I am curious. I mean, and I know you mentioned this in your book, especially because you have two daughters as well. And is there any connection genetically? Because I know you said your brother had autism too. Have they made that connection, or was it just a...
We don't have that information. We've tried. So we've had a lot of testing done and looked into it quite a bit over different periods of time, now that they have more information. So I'm pretty convinced that there is a connection.
Yeah.
Autism is more prevalent in boys anyway. So they may find that, and there's probably different forms, but they may find that the form that is in our family is something that's X-linked, which means it would be in boys. But we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So, but have a grandson, and so far, I don't think he has autism. So,
oh, beautiful. How old is he?
He's 6 months, just about 6 months old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, because I know you do mention that you saw very early signs in Kyle that alerted you to something wasn't quite.
Yeah, very early. And if I were to go back, probably even earlier than what I thought, than what I was even aware of at the time, like, because I've looked at video and you could see it at a really young age.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough. I love the work you're doing and what you're sharing. And any last words of wisdom you want to leave anybody with?
Yeah. Words of wisdom is just that you have wisdom, and it's your intuition. It's that gut feeling, and don't be afraid to rely on it.
Yeah.
As much as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on that note that you said you sensed, you knew something very early on. So yeah, we all have our own wisdom. We don't need to be told by other people, doctors, specialists, and things like that. So that's a beautiful note to leave it with people. So thank you again. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.